So Anthony and I know each other from Udacity work. So now I guess we're stuck with each other. And he talked about what I would say human expansion in the physical domain. How do we go from this little rock to another rock that is not so as nice actually, but it's still another rock. So why not go there? And I think we're actually facing important juncture as a species. And that's kind of why I picked this graphic. I think we're actually going to be transitioning from a type 0 civilization to a type 1 civilization in your lifetime. Do you know what a type 0 and a type 1 civilizations are? So type 0 is kind of like us kind of fumbling around. Not cavemen, but able to use electricity and service some things. But type 1 is when you can actually harness all the energy that reaches wherever planet you live on from the sun that you are in. That's type 1. Type 2 is when you can actually harness the power of the sun that your planetary system is in. We're far from that. So type 1, I think we're, like I say, on the cusp of it. And internet is an example of a type 1 technology, where if you think about it, internet and our connectivity is what really reduced down our physical distance down to essentially 0. You may talk about long tail, about how we can reach other, third world countries and things like that. But in general, for the most part, with the smartphones and everything, we're reaching almost type 1 kind of connectivity. Whether it's fair or not, we can say certain things about it. And then, as he said in my intro, I'm really interested in this phrase, paradox of progress. Does anybody know what that is? You know each of the words, right? You know paradox, you know progress. But what is the paradox of progress? Well, it's actually pretty much that either there's only two outcomes for our kind of species on that cusp. You're either going to go distinct or you're going to make a next step of evolution. And why is that? Well, because living and life in general is hard. Because as much as the world is connected, both the good and the bad flows. I think that's one way to think about it. It's the power of one individual to make a difference. It's exponential. Somebody said we probably have more resources or power than, let's say, kings from the medieval era, if you really think about what you can actually do as an individual now. But similarly, you can also break all these things if you so choose. So that's why I think for more than ever, the future actually turns on the choices of each individual member of that species makes, and we're at that kind of level right now. And this global trend is the actual report that you can actually look up and read. It's made by the intelligence community from our government. We think the government doesn't know too much of what they're talking about, but the FBI, CIA, and I asked all of them combined to make this report, and they actually outline what they think are 3 possibilities that our society is heading towards. One is islands. Everybody go protectionist, break off and move away from this type 1 civilization. Everyone for themselves, like tariffs, just put up walls and no trade, etc. That's one possibility, and if you look at the rhetoric, at least, that seems to be a winning trend. The second is kind of harkens back to our colonial era, where you have all of these colonial powers and they each have their own spheres of influence. That's what they call by orbit. So we can say that, let's say Asia, it orbits around China. US, North America still orbit around US, but Russia, Australia, everybody takes their own orbit, and it has satellites or different nations kind of orbiting around that particular central country to do that. And that's a kind of a midway sort of outcome. The thing that probably the best that's resilient as a human species or any human species is the resiliency of what communities provide. That's the community, which is loosely connected set of really core identifying thing, essentially how the internet was made. You all know how the internet was created by DARPA, right? What it was made for? Yes? What was it made for?
so people that have the same core values can stay connected to each other?
No, it was made so that we can survive nuclear war with Russia. And if big pieces of the network is wiped out, other pieces are still functioning and works correctly. We just happen to use it to now shop. But that's the whole point of having this kind of research, that you don't know how the outcome will be to do that. Okay? So in general, that's what the paradox is. And if you look at the trend, both statements are true. And Obama, let's say Democrats, will say that there's no time to be alive as a human in our known human civilization, really. It's a good opportunity. There's never been a better time to be human. But people, drug abuse, emotional issues, happiness, those are all trending also very badly. Social media, while it connects, it also makes people feel like they're falling behind or whatever. There's all of these effects of being connected. Or like us working, you're connected all the time to work. You don't have time to decompress, things like that. So there's always this dark side or the shadow side to things, and that's really what the paradox of progress is. People have all the reasons to be happy in 2018, yet people are always the most unhappy that they've always been. So how come that paradox of progress? Okay? And I like to joke that actually, as a practicing Buddhist, we have another name for that. We call it dukkha, or suffering. That's actually a pretty loose translation of the word dukkha. Duk means badly formed, ka means wheel. So dukkha means a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. So if you imagine an oxen cart or something, which none of us have ever ridden, but you can use your imagination. If you have something that's badly fitted wheel and you're traveling, how does that ride feel like? Smooth? No, quite bumpy. Not maybe a roller coaster, but bumpy. So that's what it means. It just means it's a little bit of a pain. It's not quite suffering, because there's good parts and bad parts, but it's just an ill-fitted sort of journey. And I think that's just the way the universe is set up. Because even a type 2 civilization or type 3 civilization who's able to harness the power of the whole universe, the galaxy that they live in, guess what? There's so many other galaxies, and the universe is quite bigger. So it almost is never ending. And you have all this power to destroy the whole galaxy potentially. So if you can harness the power of the sun and cause a supernova, you can pretty much wipe everything. So there's always good and bad that comes with it. All right, so what do we do with that? And the talk is about what I see as an opportunity that this AI fifth revolution that's coming with AI, that's actually the opportunity to really be a type 1 civilization. And we say, okay, all of you have gone through childhood and education, so we ask the question, what would you want to give to a future generation? What kind of education would you want them to have? Or a kind of experience or a life that they can lead? Okay? So what if, for a kid like Maddie, her best friend, the pet dog, is with her all the time. And the dog or the pet is able to listen deeply to all the conversation and be that caring sort of guardian, always watching over her. And sort of able to let her grow in all of these different dimensions that we need to grow as humans to do that. Okay? And then second scenario, maybe Quinn in a nursery, similarly listened in by, let's say, another persona of Freddie, that is actually has a knowledge and the background for child development expert, and figuring out what may be the best practices or the kind of pedagogy that works best for Quinn. Okay? And one of the things that we find in education is, we always say project-based education is the best, or learning the traditional route, memorizing and practicing is the best. Well, it turns out, depending on the learning style and whatever people want to do, there's usually not the best answer for everybody. There's usually a really good rule of thumb that works well for the majority of the population, but it doesn't always work well for everything. Okay? So one of the traits that you can do then is, what if Freddie, as an expert watching over Quinn, can realize the type of play and the type of thing that Quinn tends to use in order to interact and solve problems, and use that in figuring out what Quinn will actually gravitate and make any note about anxiety or sort of pleasurable moments that Quinn is experiencing, to be able to formulate what kind of next learning experience will be best for Quinn, right? All right, so then let's move on to Lisa. In this case, as humans, it's a very important part of child development to be able to use imagination to grow in that way. You don't want to just give them all consumptions about like pre-made world that for them to enjoy and immerse themselves in. They should actually learn to create that world themselves, whether it's imaginary or otherwise, to do that. And in this case, she could be going through a situation as a airline hostess and dealing with difficult situations, because one of the things that we find in education and even parenting in general is that we like to protect all our students and everybody from difficult situations. But it's actually just like vaccines, things like that. What you want is a controlled dosage so that the system has a chance to learn and grow from that experience without being overwhelmed by that. And being able to modulate that difficulty or that particular tension is what makes it good. And that amount of dosage or the tension that's needed for each person is probably likely different. In general, we haven't had a chance to personalize everything, so we tend to use one metric per whatever category that you can come up with. But in general, the one-size-fits-all is something that we have done for centuries because that's all we're able to do. Okay? So if we collect all of that and everything that we're able to do in the background, collecting all that data, well, by the end of a month or whatever period, you might be able to detect learning style changes, the rate of mastery, and the personality traits of these kids. So it really comes down to this observational power that AI has. That if you keep watching something, turns out you learn to see patterns. And with those patterns, you can actually make then predictions based on that model, because the patterns tend to be a particular frequency and it oscillates. So they tend to follow a particular trend, so you can start to predict what will happen come next, because you have the historical data to be able to tell you to do that. All right. So if we're going to collect all of these things into an education system, then one might imagine something like this, of having a smart toy in the middle that we talked about. We called it with various names before: imaginary friend, Freddy, whatever. But it's really an expert listener and an encourager that's there with that child all the time, learning all the quirks, all the pros and cons, all the preferences, yet at the same time be expert enough to tap into teaching resources, the best assessment tools, the best pedagogy. Whether it's playing, learning, and you can be playing with blocks, playing in sand, doesn't have to be on a computer, but it's able to oversee and guide that kid properly throughout all the different phases of their life, and be able to interact with both the teacher and the parents. So the teacher's role changed in a sense that now the teachers can focus on the more social behavior aspects of the learning that only other humans can give to each other, and not so much the pedagogy. Because it's unrealistic to expect teachers to do this for 10 students, much less 60 students that are more common these days. So to be able to personalize and give this to it, I think the complexity also comes from what we think the AI can do. And we think that this change that we're seeing with machine learning and AI and deep learning, really the real change is the fact that we're able to deal with complexity now. So most of you are working towards what I would call a two-dimensional piece of paper, yeah? So what is that two-dimensional piece of paper supposed to say about you?
You learn what you're supposed to learn.
What is that? It's based on the learning outcomes of the program, whatever. And you know all your friends that are in the same program going to get the same piece of paper, right? Is it all the same? Similar enough? Does it capture the complexity of your knowledge and you in that piece of paper? Okay, so I purposely made the case that it's a two-dimensional thing that we collapsed it. So what you really want is this rich high dimensionality data all about you, that it's keep tracking of all your historical data, all your historical behavior, not in a way that's supposed to punish you, but it's a way to of profiling that. And let's suppose, as Anthony was talking about, the skills or the engineers that you're supposed to do, the job that you're meant to do, well, imagine if that high dimensionality is kept and the job high dimensionality is kept, and we can do the mapping in that space, knowing all your strengths and weaknesses to map it, instead of crushing all your things down to a two-dimensional piece of paper and a job description, and then trying to match it that way in that space. That's where it's really inefficient, I believe, right? So that's really the big opportunity, because now AI, we have compute and the data storage space to store all of that essentially for free. That why don't you stay in that high dimensional space without needing to collapse it? Because we have these things called subjects and homework and school and everything, because we didn't have a better way of categorizing it based on our 17th century, 18th century, but schooling hasn't really changed since then. Really, you still sit in classroom and listen to people. But there's also a good part to it, which is everybody learns based on stories. And I think a good lecture is about telling a story so that it's memorable and you have a context in your mind. But it's terrible for learning actual engineering because you're supposed to practice. But if we remember the different function of what it's supposed to do versus what it's not meant to do, then I think everybody's lives is easier to do that. Okay? So, but I want to sort of show this education system like this is a utopia, but it's not. In a way that it's a little bit of a straw man, in a sense that if we're really going to do a 21st century education, then we really have to reach the last billion, or go to the 7 to 10 billion people that we'll have on Earth. And if we're going to look beyond just the Western view of things, from my home country, there's this project where there's child labor because these kids are orphans and they wouldn't be fed otherwise, so they have to work in these tea shops. So, this is a little bit far from our reality, but it's a little bit, that's everyday reality for them. So they have to work normal business hours, but after those hours are over, there's this Miami project which takes this bus around like a mobile classroom, like mobile in a true sense of actually just being on wheels, and just teach them basic literacy, math, and computer skills to give them that safe environment to gain confidence in. But the way they do it is still one size fits all. So for me, if we're going to design a personalized education system, it has to work for this population too, so that we're able to give them that personalized curriculum, which does not assume a presence of a parent, for example, or a stable classroom. But they should still have the space to do that. And then I also want to point out that AI, the way that it's built right now, is mostly from Western data sets. So that means that AI tends to learn about white male or females, and it's actually pretty bad about learning to generalize to other population. And as far as I know, most AI data sets do not include things from Islamic schools or population. And the AI is only going to learn patterns of the examples that you show it. So if you only show it particular set of examples without that diversity, you're going to create just more limited AI that's able to help only a limited demographic to do that. So, and I also want to purposely draw a line between science and religion, things like that, in a sense that if you want to engage in the modern world, especially with AI and stuff like that, but people have very strong religious backgrounds, it should not preclude you from being able to participate in this new future of the world, because part of being human has a big spirituality and other aspect to it that gives you meaning, right? So we want to make sure that the data set itself is represented and the nuances of the situation and whatever the diversity that it's supposed to represent it is represented. Okay, so that's just in young kids' schools. So for this audience, let's get to here. Most of you probably grapple with this, I would bet. What are you going to do after you graduate? After master's? PhD? After PhD, just get a second one. Why not? Right? You can stay in school all day, all your life. And so coming from academia, I know that in many office hours, I've had many of these conversations. And even before coming to school, a lot of parents worry about, oh, which college should my kid go to? How much money should I spend on this? Should they really do co-curricular activity? Is it that important? Will they make a lot of money? Would Google hire them? Kind of problems, right? And then it's like, which school should I go to? Does it have the prestige or whatever? So how do you make those decisions? Do you think you will be able to use a mentor / an AI to be able to make those conscious decisions about it? Have the information at your tip? Potentially, right? Because so information, it's also a double-edged sword, because if you have too much information, you're burdened by it, you don't know what to make decisions on. So I just bring it up in terms of if there's a guidance AI that's watching. And so imagine if you had this fortune to be watched by this AI since you were 5. By the time you reach to, let's say, 20, what do you think AI would know about you? Be like, no. You always like that kind of boy and it never turns out well. You're like, it's okay, AI, it's okay. I'm still going to go for it. So that kind of things you can start to imagine. And one of the criticism that we get is then people will just be like, hey AI, just tell me what to do. Right? You'll be like, Siri, just tell me what to eat. We already do that. They shake it. They're like, eat here. You're like, okay. So people are worried about it. People are like, what if we transfer human decision-making power to an external agency? So I only like to point out that we've been doing that in religion forever. But it's okay. It's okay. It's a human trend to do that. But the whole point is to be able to build what we're going to call anti-fragile humans. So you guys have probably heard of grit and persistence and all that stuff, right? To be successful in life. Haven't you heard that? You know which species is really persistent and has a lot of grit? Ants, cockroaches. They survive a lot of mass extinctions. Is it a good trade? What do you think? Is persistent a good trade to survive? Better than dying, like in Mars, like Anthony. I was like, I'm not going, Anthony. He's like, good luck. No, I think there's actually a different way to see change. You can either try to survive change by just outlasting it and hoping it passed and it didn't kill you, or you could use things like AI disruption that's for sure coming and use it as a chance to catapult yourself. And I put this slide in because at Deep Learning Institute, I thought I was done advising people about their career choices, but turns out I'm still not done. With all these professionals come in and say, should I jump into data science? Should I just become a deep learning person? It's like, what did you do before? Physics? No, it turns out physicists are actually really good at deep learning. So, because they're good with dealing with complexity. So what I talk to those professionals and things like that, especially people my age who are reaching more like what we would call modern midlife crisis kind of thing, you have potentially plenty of money, economic utility. How much economic utility are you adding to society? Therefore, this is how much money you can extract from that. But I don't think the future generation, maybe even starting with you guys, will not have that luxury. You'll actually have to start asking harder questions about what do you think your life means? And that's a hard one to face, potentially, if you don't have a strong foundation to do that. That's okay, we can help with personalized AI. And somebody wanted a little more technical, so we have 4 relevant big techniques in deep learning right now that works. For the most part, what people use is what we call supervised learning. Supervised learning is where you have a lot of data, but it's labeled. Somebody told you this is apple, this is orange, this is pineapple, this is watermelon, and you have lots of them. So you show that to the AI, and the AI is like, oh, this is apple, this is pineapple. It's learned it from supervised learning. You're literally supervising its learning. Okay? So as the name implies, unsupervised is like, hey, here's a bunch of things. It may or may not be fruits. You figure it out, and it tries to bucket them. It goes, oh, this one's with rough skin. Let's put them together. And then I think they're like this. And that's unsupervised learning. And for the most part, really hot topic of research right now is reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is usually how our parents teach us. If you do well, you get rewarded. If you don't do well, you get punished. And in general, that's why reinforcement learning tends to use games to do that, because in games it's really nice that you know if you're doing well or not. By the way, I know you guys are probably going to be having senioritis or close to wanting to leave school and whatever, but enjoy the last bit of your life where somebody's telling you whether or not you're doing well in life without some easy metric like money to hold on to. It's actually kind of nice to have somebody tell you and still have a safe space to make mistakes, grow, but there's a support for that. So enjoy that. I would enjoy that if I were you. And then the last bit that most people don't talk about is active learning. The model itself tells you where it needs more data in order to be able to tell the difference between the two things. Like, let's say some things that look really two fruits really look similar to each other. It says, give me more example of this so that I can tell one species from another, or something like that. Okay? So with those techniques, I think we're able to combine them to be able to personalize education for each person. What are you going to get? You're going to get a very patient mentor who will guide you towards that growth. He will watch you fail over and over again, but patiently still guide you to the right way, right? Which most of us don't have. And then the idea is to use your strengths so that your weaknesses don't hold you down, and what we will call in education T-shaped skills. And here's the really important part. Everybody thinks we're trying to build to one superhuman. I don't think such things should exist. I think what we can only endeavor to do is just a better version of each person. Like you're born, version 0. By the time you die, hopefully is your version 100. But that's your version, not some idealized version of that, whatever that may be. Okay? All right. So to make all of that work, I'm actually trying to corral these domain experts, diverse coalition that I think is required to build a data set, because for the most part, as I've been mentioning many times here, that whatever the AI sees, the example it sees is what it learns. So if we don't give it diverse data sets, then it's not going to learn it, right? But we also need to have, like, let's say historians that look at historical data. Because if you actually have a data set, and then if you have to judge whether or not somebody's going to make bail, like jail, but make bail for not going to jail, or yes or no, but if you see like a particular race and you predict that they're going to not make bail, it will be highly accurate AI, but it's not the AI that we should make, because it has inherent biases built into it. Similarly with socioeconomic, with the countries and everything, if you have only data set that comes from the developed world, that data set is going to be completely wrong for the third world or developing world, and when we try to help those people, because the AI won't even understand those people. Or take kids like autistic children. If you only have data set that doesn't include autistic children, when they're acting their normal self, the AI will mispredict, because based on that data set, it's out of bounds, right? So there are all of these implications. And the nice thing that I like about it, and it's not sexy for people like us from STEM to talk about people from liberal arts majors kind of things, but in general, I think all of those people can plug into this data side of things, help us prepare the data. They don't have to build the AI, but they can help us educate the AI so that it can help educate everyone else, instead of trying to turn everybody into an engineer, right? So that Paradox of Progress report actually ends with this statement, that the most resilient society will likely be those that unleash and embrace the full potential of all individuals. So I think the the answer to this is pretty clear of how we become type 1 civilization. And that's where I think is the big potential of why I call it the Human Insight Project. So, and it kind of give everybody a piece of the pie that they can contribute in to do that. Because otherwise we say, if you're not part of the workforce to build the AI, kind of like Facebook, social media, right? I don't think you can disrupt your way to AI and have a 20-year-old wake up and say, no offense, have a 20-year-old wake up and say, I'm going to build the AI, it's going to control the whole world. I don't think it will come out the way that we will probably trend towards the extinction route, where we just check Facebook all day and then just not grow as species, and then when some catastrophe strike, we'll just be wiped out. Whereas I think the only way, and why I like Anthony and things like that, is the only way I think we can keep up with this changing nature of society and life is we grow in every dimension. One way we grow is physically, our physical footprint, from Earth to the whole solar system, so on. But the other way we can grow is our mind, which is a much bigger part of our experience, and you can use AI to do that in a guided way, because that is not mapped. I don't know about you, but there's lots of things in my mind that's not mapped, and I do not want anyone to map it. But I still would like some guidance on how to navigate through that labyrinth. And I think that's the true potential of it. Yeah?
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Have some questions for Kelvin?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I really love the idea of like an AI pet which will be with you throughout your life.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is this like has already been implemented, or is this like a hypothesis that you're planning on implementing?
I'm working on it right now.
Nice.
Not at NVIDIA. But I have some people that I'm mentoring that, including, I think you made the hardware prototype, right? So we think we have a hardware prototype for that toy. It's not that hard.
Cool.
It's more the AI backend to make it a smart toy that people don't get tired of. I think that's the full potential of the AI toy. It's, you change it, like you go to sleep, and then as the kid grows, the toy grows, and it's a completely different toy and interaction.
Which was my follow-up question.
Yeah.
If you plan to do it like through a lifelong process, how do you plan to?
Well, I think when we get to, let's say, phase 2 or phase 3, it will just become ambience intelligence. You won't even have a toy. You just be like God? Instead of God, you'll be like, AI, tell me what to eat. And the AI is like, you had too much steak, it's time for some salad.
Question, do you think there's any shortcoming in the current techniques that would limit what you're trying to do?
Oh yeah. There's lots of shortcomings in our current AI technique. Let me put it this way. Kepler, Newton, Einstein. Kepler was only able to do observational, and it did curve fitting. It's like, it's an ellipse. Right? Newton's like, I found something called gravity, and it explains it. And then Einstein came along and was like, no, everything is just curve. And like, so I think we're in the Kepler or pre-Kepler phase. We're like, yeah, it seems to be working. How's the AI working? I don't know. Don't touch it. Like, that's the era. So I think there will be some theory that comes like the Newton level, and then when we're really beyond the Einstein, we'll be like, well, I don't know what those fools are talking about. But the nice thing about, let's say, gravity and even the Kepler equation is they work. Our satellite going to Mars, it's all based on Kepler's equation. I don't need Einstein to do that. In fact, if I use Einstein, I won't get to Mars. So I think what I think about as a teacher or whatever is, what are the truths that's appropriate for this level? And then use that. So yeah, of course there's limitations, and that's why it's only supervised learning that works, and there's a lot of research going on for that. I think you'll see it in about 4 years or so from now, a big change in the way we do AI. Yeah?
My question is kind of personal and more philosophical.
Yeah.
So,
personal to me or you?
personal to me.
Okay, good, because I was like...
So we talked about diverse correlation. So, like you talked about having a pet AI which can tell you rational things, apart from what religion says, or apart from like traditional beliefs or cherished beliefs.
Yeah.
So, as a society, we respect diversity and differences as well. So, how are you going to like bridge the gap between those two?
Which two?
Like, what are our upbringings right now, and what you're trying to build? The upbringings of us and upbringing of the children with smart pets are going to be different, right?
Maybe not. Maybe not. How affected are you by your smartphone?
I'm dependent on it.
Yeah, so is my 90-year-old grandma. Yeah, seriously, right? It's in it. That's why I think it's a big change. Yeah, I'm not saying like she's like, what is this? And then she keep texting the wrong thing, right? So I'm not saying you'll be proficient in media first, but the whole society shift. Like the internet is there for everybody. So, and I think this modulation is something I really think about, because in general there's something called overfitting in AI, right? It basically means that you just memorize whatever the patterns that you give it, and then if something new happens, you're like, I don't know. Like, that's what overfitting is. So let's say I have an AI that does me versus you, right? Clearly should be different, because we're at very different phases of our life and the things we care about, etc. So how do we have this generalized intelligence, yet at the same time service you correctly and me correctly? Let's say even with accents and things like that. So I'll give you an example from a self-driving car. So let's say voice commands that we're doing for self-driving, everybody talks about it. Guess what? That accuracy is not that high because of accents. But if you combine the image and the sound and look at someone's lip moving, turns out your lip movement in a given language is accent agnostic. So we can say, oh, I think that's what they said, and then look at the lip movement, and then you can get really high accuracy based on that. So just like us humans, we use body language to communicate through different senses. If you make the AI that it makes different senses, you can do that better. Now, the personalized part is, well, I'm not going to obviously train that AI to understand all accents, like that's a database of nightmares, right? But what I can do is your car knows about you based on your historical train use, and it stays on that car versus my car. But the central server has a generalized model for everybody. You see? So that's how you do it with the server client model and the integrated model to do that. So you need both.
One more question. It's a more obvious question, but this is a question about privacy.
Yeah.
So when you're building a smart pet who actually knows everything about you from childhood, how are you going to like securely build a model? Like, if you're going to build a model, you are having some parameters, like hyperparameters, which you're going to set. So you will be having some of his very personal data.
Yep.
So how is that individual going to feel about it?
Apple has solved it already. Secure enclaves on the edge device that's encrypted, even they can't read. As long as you have good enough autoencoder or something to compress it so that it has a good facsimile of you in there. And blockchain and these decentralization will help you. But just because you asked about privacy, nobody's going to have any in the AI world. You already don't with Google. It's just going to be more overt. You really could not have any privacy. But you will still have trust. And I believe trust will become the number one currency, not money. There's a difference. Yeah.
Is there any career path in AI for like, I know it's a lot of software and like coding. I know like in aerospace engineering we do like quite a bit more on the control theories.
Yeah.
Is there any like kind of career path for an AI for like aerospace engineering?
Why not? I think there's a career path for everybody from every background. And I'll give you that little spiel I always give everybody, which is that domain expertise doesn't go away. You should understand the problem and know how to solve it, and then the AI automates it. AI doesn't solve it for you. So as an aerospace engineer, you should be able to leverage the AI to solve your problem in a smoother, more automated way. So you are the domain expert of what it means to create that aerospace solution. AI is just a tool. So yes, just like, I mean,
For example, like I talked to PlayStation the other day at the
Yeah.
career fair, and they're like, it's a lot of like software engineering.
of course, right now, because we're at the 2000 era of AI. That's really the best analogy I can give you. In 2000, everybody thought we will enter the e-commerce society, like Prime, Arrive, 1 hour delivery, whatever. Didn't happen. 2002, all the companies went out of business. Amazon still here. 2018, they made it a reality. AI, not going to give it to you in 2020, but it will. Just a question of when. So then it becomes a utility and you can use it. Right now it's too early for you to do that jump. You should learn and be a better expert in your domain of aerospace. And then when the AI tools are ready, just like e-commerce tool website today, back in 2000, if you want to build it, you have to be a coder. These days, if you want to be an e-commerce website and be successful, you have to have good graphic taste and how it looks. Because 2 clicks and you get an e-commerce website. So you got to look at the historical trend and which phase are we in for the skill that you're asking for. Does it make sense? Like,
What's a good way to keep track of that? Just like
expand your mind. Like, keep that in as a tool that it's gonna take over our world. But how are you gonna ride that change so that because you know your problem so well, you can see it coming, you're gonna apply it to your problem, and then you ride that and become the anti-fragile human with that change. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you've read the book Master Algorithm or something. I think it was something like that. But do you think ever there will be a single algorithm that we'll be using, or is it just a multitude of different?
No, I don't believe in one size fit all kind of thing. It'd be more like different agents, but this federated learning kind of thing. It's just so much easier. Right. Just like, do we have one type of engineer? No. Right.
It was an interesting point that you made about, when AI takes over, what are humans going to be doing?
Yeah.
We can't travel for the last 4 years of our life, especially when you see gaming, in younger generations being like a huge thing. It would be weird if all you humans would be like playing games. So hopefully we find a new wave, like internet or AI. Maybe there will be something next that we haven't found yet, that will create a lot of other jobs and stuff.
Jobs?
Well, a lot of like a new technology that will create like a lot of other jobs. Because once AI takes over, it's going to be doing pretty much.
Well, I would actually ask you, why do we need jobs? How much in known human history have people had jobs?
People need something to do.
Oh, I'm not arguing that. But why does it have to be a job?
Yeah. But humans need to find, I guess, something that.
Do you watch Star Trek at all?
Yeah, I watch some.
Do they have jobs in there?
Well, I guess the job is to explore new things.
In reinforcement learning right now, the best score that they could come up with was curiosity.
Right, yeah, curious. I guess they can do a job.
No, but let's be clear, right? There were clear leaders like Captain and then they try to get into Starfleet Academy. Like, life doesn't get any easier. I'm just saying that's just not a job where if you don't work or whatever, you will starve.
So it's another kind of job.
Yeah, it's the equation change. And your contribution to society can still matter, but you get to choose, sort of, based on what you. But if you choose to just play a game all day or smoke all day, in that kind of society, that's also an option. Like 20 to 30 people, I believe, will just do that. They just enjoy life. But that's their definition of enjoying life. Like, you can't do anything about it. Like, that's why we will not have true sort of utopia or dystopia, whatever. There's too much variation. People will, like, if we were like, let's say we go to cities and people are like, no, I really want to go to the forest. They will find that last tree that we have and go to that forest. Like, you can't make them all live in this like high-tech cities. Like, we've seen too much of it. Like there will be some contrarian that will just be like, no, leave me alone.
Well, and let's hope that humans will still be, because even though we're curious, like the human body can't travel like at the speed of light. Like maybe our body won't be able to
take it.
Take it. Yeah, we need air to do that for us.
Maybe, but the other.
AI doesn't. I mean, it's obviously going to be like so smart that are we even going to be needed if we try to help? Like, is even our help going to be?
You mean the singularity? I'm not worried about singularity, because artificial intelligence is not the same thing as consciousness.
Right. Yeah. And do you think AI could develop consciousness?
No. I think AI is good at automation and making our lives easy, and we can make it so that it augments humans, whether it augments human from just outside or inside, and I'm pretty sure it will be more invasive than not, but I think we're still going to be fundamentally human, whatever that means.
Yeah, so as long as they don't have consciousness, then...
Yeah, they won't have consciousness. Don't worry about it. Oh, let me take a new guy in the back. Yeah.
You talked about trust being more important than money.
Yeah.
I mean, utopia. Like, could you please elaborate on that? Like, what does it mean? Trust was.
Take Facebook and Google business model, for example. What is their product? It's your data. Would you trust Facebook or Google with your actual data if you have a choice? You just sort of got used to being addicted to free product, right? So in the AI, as you guys all see the implication, what if it knows every damn thing about you, including all your neurosis? Like, you really like that strawberry chocolate ice cream, whatever, right? And then some advertiser know that. Guess how you expand their sale? But is that good? So that's what I mean by trust. Like, are you able to actually see the advice as something good for you or good for them? Does it make more sense now? Like,
Okay. Thank you.
So when do you think you will have a good prototype or something into reality?
December. I didn't say which year. No, just kidding. No, hopefully sometime end of this year we'll have a rough prototype. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you guys, we're talking like far vision of perfect, right? Like, just like the first iPhone, right? If you go look at it now, you're like, man, that was like whatever, right? And then like, why would you have keyboards on smartphones like BlackBerry? Like, so we're still. That's why I really like the internet analogy. We're still at around 2000 for the e-commerce. And that took about 2 decades to do. Maybe AI will be similar, maybe a little faster, but pervasiveness, and even, like just give it time. Give it time. And same thing for me. Like, all I want to do is just even some relevant recommendation. Because all I know right now is you get 0. So all I have to do is beat 0. But then if you guys shop on Amazon, right? Keep using, and then you say you're buying this, and then it's like, oh, other people bought those other 2, and every time I ignored it, I regretted it because you needed those other 2 to make whatever the thing you're. So data mining, all that, it works because there is this crowdsourcing sort of intelligence, group intelligence, and as soon as you have enough data, you can turn that on, and it will seemingly look smart without much effort. So let's have that level first, and then we can talk about this more pervasive. But you can see it, like as Elon Musk said, I think that's one of the things I learned from him too. Is like, if the rate is non-zero, you'll get there. It's just a question of time. As long as it's non-zero, and it's certainly non-zero. Yeah.
Like, what exactly do you mean by that?
That means there's always progress. If the progress is 0, then you raise to the power of whatever, then you don't go anywhere. But as long as it's like 1 trillionth, but then you're like, wait a million years, you already got there. Yeah.
About how many more years do you think we'll actually see AI? Because right now machines are just good at predicting and they don't have.
What do you mean by AI?
Sorry?
What do you mean by AI exactly?
AI, I mean a machine having common sense. Like,
Never? No.
well, that's
We don't even have common sense. No, I know what you mean. A little bit more like AGI, like general intelligence. Give or take 10 years, I would say.
about 10 years.
Yeah.
And how can you be so sure that AI will not get any consciousness? Because you need to be sure about that.
I spent 10,000 hours meditating to be sure.
Because the problem is that if it actually gets consciousness,
No, because I think that one of the biggest holes of scientific view of the world that the Eastern philosophies and people have discovered is they're too materialistic. And that word has two meanings. One, you think it's all about money. Other is you think it's all about matter. Just like, let me give you this example with smartphones. If you buy a new iPhone and you have a cloud backup, and then you get a new iPhone, right? And then you restore that backup, is that new you get a new phone, right? Is that new phone because you got a new iPhone or because there was a cloud backup? Which one came first or which one was essential to give you that new phone? So you're like, well, I can make that new phone with no backups and just the physical part. Do you think you can get there? Not the same.
With phones you can, but I don't think.
Well, you have to start fresh. But it wouldn't have accumulated all your contacts and everything. You will never get that same outcome is what I'm saying. Not that you won't get somewhere. You'll get somewhere, just different. That's all. And then if you have the same cloud backup and then you happen to put on two phones, what does that mean? Let's not get there. You're like, what? Yeah.
So during your presentation, you talked a lot about like the function of AI and how it'll be like understanding like what tailored to like what each individual kind of goes through in life and how to help them make a better decision and choice. But you haven't really talked about the skills required to be able to like work with AI like specifically like
to build the AI or to interact with the AI?
to build the AI.
How many
All
people?
about like software and
How many people do you know write compilers?
not a lot.
Yeah. That's how many people we need to build the AI. How many people use compilers? Or the internet. Right? So it's a very sub skill that unless you're already in and born with a certain brain, which I don't even have. I've seen people in grad school born with that brain. But I think I'd rather be like more common sense human as like that. So let me give you a gaming analogy. Have you guys ever played an RPG? Kind of role-playing games? Yeah?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, you know it, right? Okay, so in the beginning you pick whatever race, character, or class, right? How many points are you given? Is it the same or different?
Like to develop like a certain
Yeah,
character?
yeah.
It's different.
The total points that you get
Like
to distribute to your intelligence or strength or constitution or whatever. It's the same for every player, right? But you choose based on the whatever race or the class you want to be. You're like, and then you'd be like, you put it all into intelligence. You're like, man, I don't have any HP. Can you complain about that? No, that's what you chose to specialize. Now, what's the one way to, if you have a proper game like Game of Life, there's no level cap. So you can out-level people really fast. And that's why you have a lot of childhood geniuses because they just out-level their peer class. But guess what happened to most of those geniuses? Because life level curve catches up with the exponential law. They just plateau. And then other people just catches up. So there are special humans who can out-level everybody and have more points to add to themselves to spend it differently than you do. That's my gaming sort of engineering geeky explanation of our diversity. If that makes sense, right? Yeah.
I have a personal question.
Sure.
What does knowledge director mean?
Knowledge architect?
Knowledge architect.
I didn't want to be a learning architect because that implies I actually let people learn. Don't. But knowledge architect is more like this. It's not exactly Socrates where I'm just asking you questions, but based on our conversation and things like that, I hope I implant some seed in you that you think about some things that you might not have, but it has bigger implications. So that's the knowledge architecting that particular thing. Yeah.
So there's been some talk about reinforcement learning and Elon Musk. So I study management. Recently we had to write a paper for a class that compared, we talked about Elon Musk's ability to have a powerful vision and compare that to Toyota's high rate of manufacturing with really low rates of QA rather and high rates of quality. So I wrote a paper essentially saying that it's amazing that Elon Musk's vision is as valuable as Toyota's ability to create with minimal malfunctions in their products. So right now, Elon Musk is going through a tough time.
Yeah.
He's trying to revolutionize the factory. So my question to you is, with your current understanding of reinforcement learning, do you think the future implementations could be so powerful as to revolutionize the factory for Elon Musk and make his robotic arms so intelligent that you could truly turn off the lights in the factory?
Yes. But whether it will be before Tesla runs out of money, I don't know. Right? This is where it gets really hard to predict the timing. So it's a win, but I think if you watch Elon's interview with Joe Rogan, you guys watched that, right? And this is my point about using your RPG points. Elon chose to spend it in a very particular way. Okay? But he's also victim to it. When he says he can't shut off his mind, right? And it's both a curse and a blessing. That's usually how it is. So the engineer in me and the knowledge architect in me always says, I'm always looking for a control knob. If I can open myself to some dimension or whatever, AI, spiritual, whatever it may be, but if I don't have control of that door, I can't open and shut it at my command, it's a useless door that I open and I just become victim to it. Would not want to do that. And I think he unwittingly did it since childhood. So he's sort of there and he can't help it. Now he's being sued by the guy in Asia for calling him a pedophile. And now he's being sued by SEC for tweeting that he's going private, taking Tesla private at 420. So genius has its price, kind of thing. It's not free. I think that's one thing. It's the point analogy also. Nothing is free. There's always a side effect to it. The question is, are you able to live with it? Do you want that?